It's a deep cut for
Am I
20.
having a stroke?
It's a deep cut.
I've been on his bandwagon from forever, man. Tony Muti is a boy.
Tiny Woody's a boy. Welcome to another episode of Boom or Bust, the draft show. Max Chadwick alongside Tate, Sigworth, and Nick Merriam. Our biggest takeaways from week 5 of college football and NFL week 4. Again, recording this right before the Monday Night Football game between the Chargers and the Raiders, which will be an electric football game. Cannot wait to listen to that Manning broadcast of that game. But before we start the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to follow our Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Boom or Bust Draft. Of course, we're on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast. And please check out the merch store below. I know a lot of people have bought merch already overseas, which we love you guys for doing that already. Please continue to do so because we have a lot planned for 2022. Speaking of 2022, we got to make an update to our big board, guys, because we're basically halfway through the regular season right now, and a lot has changed from the 2022 NFL draft. So, Tate, is there any little tiny preview you want to give the listeners and the viewers for what that board may look like?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we don't want to spoil too much. I'll sprinkle a couple things. Spencer Rattler is no longer QB1 on my board. No longer QB2. No longer QB3 on my board.
Wow. Okay, so likewise. Cool.
Yeah, bit of spice. Linebacker 1, I think, is locked in for me. Maybe all a year.
Wow.
I know that we haven't really talked about the linebacker class at all in our content.
That'd be. I can't wait to hear that take because I'm kind of still struggling with that position right now. I love that though.
I may even have linebacker 2 locked in. I'm not sure.
Oh, man. All right.
I've likened some guys. Isaiah Likely. There's a guy that'll be a name to watch. I know you like him, Max. Coastal Carolina tight end. First time mentioning this year. Aiden Hutchinson's moving up. We've talked about him at length many times. Drake Jackson. I know we kind of slandered Drake Jackson 5 videos ago, but he's been playing very well for those USC fans out there. So he's definitely going to be moving up.
I will say he was inconsistent, which is what we said. And he said if he gets consistent, he's got all the tools to be a superstar, and he's become consistent. So that to defend ourselves a little bit. But yes, Drake Jackson has looked really good so far.
But I am very excited. I've the past few days I've been starting to go through and update them, and it's very exciting to think about who's been playing very well. We'll get into maybe a couple of those guys later on in this video. But yes, some bit of spice, bit of tease for our big board video coming out in maybe a couple weeks time or so.
Yeah, just to tease that a little more, this Texas game, which we'll get into with Spencer Rattler this upcoming weekend, pretty pivotal for me as to whether or not how high it'll be on my board. I'm pretty sure though. He also might not be my QB1 as of right now, but we'll see. Don't want to give away too much.
They need to score this week because Texas is going to score.
Texas is I think Texas is way better than that number 21 ranking they've got right now. So that is going to be a huge game. If you remember last year, Spencer Rattler got benched for a little bit of that Texas game because of a few turnovers he had in that game. They got a 5-star freshman now in Caleb Williams that they might not be too afraid to go to pretty early in this game.
Gonzaga College High School, DC represent. Hey.
There we go. So speaking of Spencer Rattler, speaking of the quarterbacks, our guy, or I should say your guy, I'm not going to claim him as mine, but Matt Corral went up against number 1 Alabama, and they got basically blanked this week. So Nick, how much did you watch of that game, and what do you think of Matt Corral in that game overall?
Not enough of the game that I watched, but from what I saw, he didn't really have much of a shot. There were some plays there that kind of he didn't, supplant himself as this superb QB prospect, but I think there were some things there that made me go, okay, well, he's still probably QB1 for me. There were a couple of throws late in the second half that were very nice. There's one where he was pressured immediately, spun out of a tackle, threw it downfield, hit a receiver right in the hands, 50 yards into a bucket, and the guy dropped it. That stuff, we kind of expected it a little bit when you're playing against Alabama and your team is Ole Miss. So, I'm not going to be too upset about it. I'm interested to see how they finish the season. They got another big game against Arkansas this week. I think it's an opportunity for him to really pop off against them as well. And I think it continues to be a wait and see thing with him because we've talked about his Heisman candidacy as well. I think hinges on how well Ole Miss plays, and it might be the same with his draft stock. And I think they have an opportunity here to win double-digit games. And this game against Arkansas will be kind of one of those important ones as the season goes on.
the thing we've been saying behind the scenes is we don't think Ole Miss is good enough for Matt Corral to win the Heisman, which is a shame that it is factored into the Heisman voting. But he didn't play bad against Alabama. Like, it was just the offensive line gave him zero help. Will Anderson bullied them. I mean, Will Anderson, we're going to wait till next year to really talk about him, but like, he is special. Watch out for him. He just had really no time in the pocket. It was pretty much all short throws. Explains, the completion percentage was good if you just look at the numbers, but it really wasn't taking too many shots downfield. And when he did, Nick mentioned the one huge one, I guess, that got dropped. So he didn't really play bad. He didn't do anything, I think, to maybe take away. If anything, you could look at that game and be like, he had to adjust against a good opponent and take his checkdowns, take his quick throws, and not, hold on to the ball for a million years and, hurt his team. But at the same time, he didn't really do anything, I guess, maybe to elevate his team. You could make the argument. But yeah, I would have liked to see more, but that Alabama team is so much better than an Ole Miss team. It was kind of unfair.
I feel like going into that game, however you felt about Matt Corral is basically the same way you felt coming out of that game. Like, that was a prove it game for him, but really he played fine. Like, I really do not attribute any of that to Matt Corral. They got absolutely blown out. Nick, I'm glad you brought up that play, man, because I was going to bring it up. That time where he spun out of a sack, threw it downfield, and like I said, the receiver dropped it. It was a perfect pass. He actually had another one of those plays, too, where he spun out of a sack, threw a perfect pass. I believe the receiver caught that one. But that showed like the special playmaking ability that he had. Unfortunately, those are the only two times you really saw it in the game. But I did think Matt Corral played okay. It wasn't a disastrous Matt Corral game that have happened last year and years past, but it wasn't a special Matt Corral game that we've seen basically all of this season. Which
he was clearly their best player against Alabama. Yeah. That's just that's kind of the way I look at it. Like, they were outclassed, and he was clearly their one guy who was kind of able to hang in there. But just, I mean, he could have tried to throw the ball downfield every play, and he probably would have thrown 4 picks, but he didn't.
Yep.
I don't know. Is that a bad thing that he didn't? You could say yes, you could say no. It's just,
Speaking of a guy who struggled to throw the ball downfield, Spencer Rattler went up against Kansas State this weekend, and he threw an interception. It was a bad interception, but overall, I thought he looked pretty good. There's actually a PFF article that came out where Anthony Tresh said that Spencer Rattler right now, apparently, on 0 to 19-yard throws, second highest grade in PFF history this year. But the 20-plus yard throws, he went from one of the highest grades in the country to literally one of the lowest grades in the country on deep throws. Now, I don't think that has a lot to do with him. I think it has a lot to do with defenses kind of figuring out, hey, we got this gunslinger in Spencer Rattler. He wants to throw it deep. Let's not let him. So they're playing a lot of too high, the defenses he's going up against, and they're taking away that deep ball, basically daring him to throw that deep ball. And he's done really well, checking it down, but man, you could tell that he wants to sling that rock, and he hasn't really so far. We'll see what happens against Texas, but another guy, Malik Willis, looked unbelievable against UAB today. He has been maybe the best quarterback in the country so far. Maybe a Heisman name to keep an eye on there. The strength of schedule is definitely a question there. But yeah, quarterback update, basically same old. Matt Corral stayed the same. Rattler looked a little bit improved, and Malik Willis has been tearing it up as usual. Let's go to a position that we actually haven't really covered too much, a really important position, and I would even say maybe not as messy as quarterback, but still pretty messy overall, and that is this receiver class. Tate, Drake London may be the Blitnikoff favorite right now, man.
Yeah, Drake London, for those who follow us on Twitter, again, that's at Boomer Buzz Draft on Twitter. We have been tweeting Drake London highlights basically every week because he's putting out 100-plus games basically every week with some highlight plays. In contested catches situation this year, Drake London has been elite. He's making some ridiculous catches in double and maybe even triple coverage, very physical, going up for the ball. It's been impressive stuff to watch for Drake London. Haven't really talked about him yet that much. But the numbers are ridiculous and the tape is kind of ridiculous. So he is definitely a guy that'll be rising up on our next board for sure. Treylon Burks, we've talked about him a little bit here and there. Huge receiver size-wise, but he moves really well, has played very well. Who did they play this past week? A&M?
Georgia. They got destroyed by Georgia.
They got destroyed, and he didn't do that much because the team got destroyed. So it'll be interesting to see how he rebounds going forward, but he's another guy. I think the top 5 for me, Burks, London, obviously Olave and Wilson, and then also George Pickens. I'm a George Pickens guy. I think are pretty locked in as like the top 5. But then from there, I think it gets pretty wide open. Jahan Dotson, David Bell for Purdue has been playing really well. The target share, I think, I don't know the number there, but he just gets fed the ball nonstop because they don't really have anyone else. And then Romeo Dubes. First time I've said his last name on this show. Obviously continues to play well with Nevada. So yeah, this wide receiver class, we haven't really talked about it that much, but there's a lot to unpack there for sure.
Yeah, I think Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the same lines right now. It's just that Garrett and Wilson for me have still been the top 2 guys, and it's just kind of in a battle for wide receiver 3. I'm kind of waiting and seeing what the full sample size for all these guys, Dubs, Burks, Pickens, who has he even played yet? I think we're still waiting on him.
It'll be a while.
We'll see. It'll be a while. Drake London obviously has been fantastic. He's a guy who's going to be moving up my board. But I think you need the full sample size to fully know what these guys are going to the NFL, and I really need to do like a full study because I like to get into the kind of tendencies of route running and stuff like that with these guys, and it's just right now it's close. There's a lot of it's like T. Higgins type prospects where it's like, these guys are good, but is it like sustainable at the NFL level? And I'm not certain, and we got to look and really examine that. And yeah, there's a lot of names, but it's not great.
Yeah, I agree. I think Wilson and Olave haven't really played amazingly so far. I think they played pretty well. Olave's really turned on, I think, the last couple games. But yeah, Drake London, who usually would scare me because he is just big receiver who dominates in contested situations, and we've seen receivers like that before fail in the NFL, like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. However, Drake London, what he does really well that I think will translate really well is that he breaks tackles, and that is something that we've seen translate from college to the NFL. So that is something that you can hang your hat on with Drake London, because usually those bigger receivers that can't separate, which I think he actually does a really good job separating with his size, but still, I'm still a little wary of them. Jahan Dotson, apparently, Mel Kiper's wide receiver 1 and number 8 overall. I'm a Penn State fan, man, but I'm not too sure about that. Yeah, Treylon Burks. I think it's a 4-horse race right now. I think Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, and Drake London. Those are kind of the 4 big names to know about. And we'll see what Jahan Dotson against Iowa this weekend, which will be huge. So let's go do this rookie quarterback class. And this was a pretty banner week for rookie quarterbacks. Lawrence looked great. Wilson looked great. Mac Jones looked really good against Tom Brady. Justin Fields looked amazing after a horrible week last week. And then, of course, Trey Lance is getting an opportunity now with Jimmy Garoppolo potentially out. So, Nick, what'd you make of this rookie quarterback class?
Yeah, so I texted you guys earlier that I thought Justin Fields had the best game of any rookie so far this year. And then you think about it, and I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot everyone else kind of just played well this week, and it's kind of really tough to make that argument. But no, I really liked what we saw from Fields because it was a low sample size of throws. He only threw the ball 17 times, but he had like 3 or 4 big-time throws on the – am I allowed to say that on this pod? I don't even know.
Yeah, you can say that, yeah.
All right, and so, yeah, that's not our statistic, but it's another thing. But in that game against Detroit, he was just tossing down the field, making these beautiful touch passes down the field with accuracy and timing, and that's kind of what I expected from him. I thought I saw in the few throws against Cincinnati flashes of that. You couldn't see it against Cleveland because he had 0 time to let the routes develop, and it popped out against the Detroit Lions. Our friend PJ Clark saying it's the Lions, it shouldn't count, but I believe that the throws he made in that game were good enough that it didn't matter who the opponent was. I think he truly elevated that offense with his arm alone. He didn't really need his legs. And even with them not throwing the ball a whole lot, you saw the upside with him as a passer. Trevor Lawrence obviously sparked the Jaguars a lot Thursday night. They fell apart late, and they ended up losing to Cincinnati Bengals team, who's also rallying around a quarterback in Joe Burrow. But it was definitely Lawrence's best game to this point against what I think is an underrated Bengals defense. Zach Wilson also made some great downfield throws against Tennessee, whose defense is also suspect, but it was he gave the Jets the ability to win that game late, showed some poise, didn't turn the ball over a whole lot in that game. I don't know if he did or not, but obviously he gets the Jets their first win, and a big reason for that is because of how he played. And then Trey Lance came in and kind of just did the same things we saw in preseason. He completed 50% of his passes, but his average yards per pass was still like over 10, which is, of course, because he threw one long touchdown pass. But still, it's like funny. It's like this guy is completely inefficient pass to pass, but then at the end of the day, he has one long bomb that kind of makes his numbers look, I don't know, they're like kind of good. And then obviously Mac Jones, I don't think we need to talk a whole lot about. He's kind of just been the solid QB through this, who's been consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not much to add on top of that. I agreed that Justin looked excellent. Play calling was much improved. Play calling against Cleveland was downright horrendous.
Yeah.
It didn't give him he was running in shotgun. They wouldn't give him a halfback to pick up blocks. They weren't really calling designed runs. The throws he was asking to make weren't, his first NFL start. I thought it was just ridiculous against Cleveland. But Justin looked much improved. Obviously, it was the Detroit Lions, but still making some really nice, NFL quality throws. Zach Wilson played better. I still think there's some room for him to improve. Trevor Lawrence played well. We saw the rushing ability. We talked a little about way back in our Trevor Lawrence scouting report that he has actual rushing ability, and he showed that on Thursday night. And Trey Lance, looked pretty good. Excited to see him actually start more games and get even more experience. He is faster than I thought, or I remembered. There was like one run specifically that he just completely blew by a couple people, and I was like, oh wait, hold on a second. But yeah, huge arm, looked good. Excited to see more of him for sure.
Yeah, Fields I thought looked really good, and I was really happy because last week was not good. And Matt Nagy, man,
start him. I meant to say that. Like, Andy Dalton should not be playing anymore. I'm sorry. Justin Fields needs to start for the Chicago Bears.
I apologize because this week I was gonna be like, you know what, Matt? Last week we bashed you and whatever. This week you played to Justin Fields' strengths. Good for you. And then today he came off this quote saying, no, Dalton's still our guy. Matt, just shut your mouth, man. Just literally just shut up. Like once Dalton's back, then maybe you could say, okay, Dalton's going to start, and then let us be really mad. Dalton's not back yet. Like Justin Fields is still going to play another game or two, and if he keeps killing it, that promise that you made is going to look dumber and dumber. So just shut up. Like every time someone praises Justin Fields, you don't have to say no, Dalton's the guy. Like Matt Nagy's the most infuriating quarterback. I know a lot of Bears fans are not big fans of him right now. Zach looked awesome. I thought we saw. I would say this week was awesome because every quarterback, that all the rookie quarterbacks, they kind of showed who they were in college. Whereas like Trevor Lawrence looked awesome. He had some awesome throws, could run. Justin Fields' deep ball looked great this week. Zach Wilson was making those backyard football plays. You saw the touchdown of Corey Davis. I was just like, yep, that is BYU Zach Wilson right there. And Mac Jones, like Nick said, solid. Just solid. Like not going to go above and beyond, but also not going to lose your team the game either. Which is why Alabama won the national championship. And then Trey Lance was inefficient overall, which is what we've seen from Trey Lance, where it's like, man, the highs are so high, but the lows are so low. So it was pretty cool seeing all five of them kind of show what they were in college, and hopefully keep improving right now. Tate, I know you wanted to talk about a certain rookie receiver who might actually be like doing something now.
Yeah, you want to talk about showing what they were in college with the quarterbacks. Kadarius Toney actually showed what he was in college in the NFL this past week. Nice. I know it wasn't the most ridiculous stat line. You want to talk about that transition, by the way? But for 6 catches, maybe 7 catches for like 80 yards, I think it was the ultimate total, maybe a little more than that. Don't have it memorized. But the tape, I mean, some of those plays, he was clearly extremely shifty. You saw like the route running that we were talking about way back when. He was making guys miss left and right, picking up first downs, making, playmaking type plays for the Giants, which is exactly what they drafted him to be. We haven't seen it yet in the NFL, but he really showed what we thought he would be in the NFL. And so I'm just, after weird training camp and all this weird stuff that was around Kadarius Toney previously, I'm very excited that if they can get him to settle in and actually be who he was at Florida.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I was adding something about rookies here, it's just we've talked about running backs a whole lot, and I'm gonna eat my words a little bit in the past by talking about Najee Harris because he looks like an absolute stud. It's just the Steelers' offensive line sucks and they can't take advantage of him. But a guy I kind of wanted to highlight right now is just Javonte Williams has transitioned so well to the NFL, and that was like one of the names where, like, if you knew who he was, you were like, this guy is really good. And about half the people it felt like who were following the draft just didn't know who he was because he played at North Carolina, right? And it's working, The Denver's got the 2 running back system going. They're using Melvin Gordon as well. They have a pretty good offensive line, so that helps out. But he's doing the broken tackles thing, right? It's happening, It's there, and it's completely transitioned. He doesn't have to be this great pass catching threat because it seems like he's bringing a tackle every time he carries the ball. He hasn't had a whole lot of carries yet because of that split, but he's been super efficient this week. 7 carries for 48 yards. That's great. That's nearly 7 yards a carry. And I think that will continue to happen. I think Javonte Williams is eventually a full-time back there in Denver. He's great.
He also had that one run where he dragged 4 people an extra 10 yards, which was ridiculous.
Literally incredible. It's pretty cool. To go back to it, all the rookies are starting to look like who they were in college, which is pretty cool because Rondale Moore also breaking a ton of tackles there in Arizona, which is what he was basically doing at Purdue too. All right, so let's move on to this weekend coming up in college football. There's a lot to look over, guys. You got obviously the Red River rivalry game with Oklahoma and Texas. Then you also have Arkansas Ole Miss is a big game. Georgia Auburn's a big game. And then, of course, the one I've got to bring up, maybe not a big one for prospects, but overall, Penn State, Iowa, all of a sudden is a playoff game right now. Number 3, Iowa. Number 4, Penn State. But, Tate, what are you looking out for this week in college football?
Yeah, I didn't realize Iowa was 3 in the country. When did I miss
Oregon
that?
lost, man. Yeah.
Oops. Ole Miss, the Matt Corral rebound game, also the Treylon Burks rebound game. Both those teams just got blown out last week. Spencer Rattler versus Texas is a good one for sure. There was another game that I was looking at before this. Georgia Auburn. Auburn's probably going to lose by 1 million, but that's another 2 versus 18.
We don't know. Bo Nix looks like a superstar. You watched him against LSU, man.
Let's not start with this.
Johnny Manziel.
Let's not start this. Let's not get the fans confused and deceive them. I was Penn State. They do have some people. It'll probably make the matchup graphic that we post Boomer Bust Draft on Twitter once again. Alabama, Texas A&M. In terms of the Texas A&M guys, DeMarvin Leal, Anaya Smith, Isaiah Spiller, Jalen Weidemeyer, that's a big game for them. In terms of the scoreline, it probably won't be a very close game, maybe not. But in terms of the A&M prospects, I think that should be on our matchup graphic. Anaya Smith, I called him Kadarius Toney preseason, has not really shown 100% of that, but I do think he has the tools. We just got to wait and see. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on this week for me.
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of the bases with looking at college players. I think Michigan State's an interesting one as they continue to be undefeated with that running back of theirs, Kenneth Walker, right? Yeah, he's been sick, and they continue to roll. A lot of teams that are kind of just coming out of nowhere. Kentucky looks really good. Obviously, Will Levis is a guy we've kind of sort of had on our radars. I don't know if he's a great prospect, but they're interesting. The one that this is more just a college football commentary thing. BYU is now ranked 10th in the country, right?
Dude,
we've been talking about Cincinnati, if they go undefeated, they probably make the playoff. BYU's schedule is pretty good. If they run the table, they got some good wins in there.
They're a good team too. It's not even just they're ranked 10, but I don't think they're that good. I don't think
they've beaten
as good as number 4.
Utah, Arizona State. They still got to play Baylor. They play Boise State this week. They still got to play Virginia, who's got Brennan Armstrong, who's been playing great, and they got to play USC on the road at the end of the year. Those are all very solid wins.
Those would be really solid. That could be a playoff team. Yeah, that's a good shout right there.
No one's talking about that. I thought just saying.
For sure. I think the one besides, of course, Iowa, Penn State, I'm going to be glued to. But Bama and A&M is interesting because DeMarvin Leal plays a lot of edge. And man, oh man, if we get Evan Neal versus DeMarvin Leal for a good portion of that game, that'll be fun. It's a 17.5 point spread right now, which of course is going to be a probably dominant performance by Alabama. But we'll see. Derek Stingley Jr. has been out for a couple weeks now. But if he plays against Kentucky, him against Wan'Dale Robinson, if he matches up against him, could be really fun. I think the Tyler Linderbaum against Penn State is probably the only one you can watch on that side of the ball. But other than that, Jahan Dotson against the Iowa secondary, which has made a lot of quarterbacks look really bad. A lot of really good quarterbacks against Iowa have looked really bad, which means maybe a not so great quarterback like Sean Clifford could look really great against Iowa this week. The opposite is true, but Sean Clifford's actually played pretty well this year. And then of course the one I'm really excited for is Rattler against Texas. That's the one you got to keep an eye on for because If he shows out in that game, I think a lot of people will come back around on Spencer Rattler. But if he doesn't really perform well in that game, that might be it. And he might all of a sudden start tumbling down people's big boards. And I've heard some people even say return for senior year, which I think would be so stupid. There's no way he'd be doing that, especially with this brand that he's got right now. But that's what we got. Really exciting week of college football just happened, and we are getting into it now for this week. And we should have a big board coming out soon, kind of the halfway point of the college football season. So please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment what your big takeaways are, comment what video you want us to do next, follow our Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Boom or Bust Draft, leave a review in our podcast. Check out the website below. And, of course, please hit that merch store and get some Boom or Bust merch for yourself. So for Tate Sigworth and Nick Merriam, I'm Max Chadwick. Have a great night.